The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations in Saskatchewan has broken its silence on the forensic audit of its finances. As you've been hearing, the Indigenous Services Canada auditing firm KPMG found $34 million in questionable spending. In a statement from the organization that represents more than 70 First Nations in Saskatchewan, says it has faced unwarranted attacks in relation to the audit. For more, our Truth and Politics panel is here. Jennifer Leywitz is the CEO of Pusquash Strategies, and Niigaan Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Niigaan, great to have you with us. Niigaan, we'll start with you. Do you feel the response by the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations to the tens of millions in questionable spending has extinguished concerns that have been raised?
There's two typical responses when there's questionable or questions about First Nations organizations or governments. They'll often claim sovereignty, meaning we have a right to control our own finances, and therefore no one should tell us what to do or how to do it or how to administrate or so on. And then the second is to just not answer any questions. And so what we've got is sort of a mixture of the two, and we've got a real crisis on our hands in that if you're not willing to answer questions and go under the veil or the banner of that you don't have to, it's really problematic. It's really led to what it will be ultimately a question around ethics, around morality within the organization, integrity, and that's not good for anyone.
Jennifer, we're just getting a statement from the fourth Vice Chief of the FSIN, Craig McCallum, who's only been in office for 5 months. He's saying he cannot in good conscience stand behind the statement released by FSIN. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I was just sent that letter as well. It seems like it went out to leadership sometime early this morning and is now being circulated amongst pretty much everybody from my understanding. I think it's really telling that we're starting to see, a pattern here where we've seen female leaders in the past that have left the organization not on good terms. And now we're also seeing that same type of breakaway from young leadership. It appears that some of the executive on the FSIN appear to be almost like Fort Knox. It seems quite cliquey. I have a lot of questions for fourth Vice Chief Craig McCallum now. Did he know the statement was coming out? His statement was very much on the polar opposite end of the take that FSIN is having, where there was no accountability taken. There wasn't even the flowery statement that some governments give of we'll work to do better. It was just not at all acknowledging this. And I think people need to also realize that we have not even heard from the FSIN executive in any capacity since this has all came out. They have not faced any questions. They have not done a press conference. Nobody even knows, I think, where they are. So this is very, very concerning. And I think this letter just further raises those alarm bells.
Niigaan, what does it say to you that an elected official at FSIN is raising concerns about the actions of the FSIN?
Well, it resounds all too often to the same story that is very painful for those of us who want to argue for, defend, and then, of course, try to put forward notions of Indigenous sovereignty. When you see just a general lack of accountability and then whistleblowers within the organization coming out, or this isn't quite a whistleblower situation, but it certainly is one in which it was like a wasn't me kind of situation, that's really problematic because what it tells you is there's some dysfunction in the organization from almost the beginning, from anyone in his involvement, and therefore the answers are often being found too late after the fact, and usually then it's all about covering your own behind in these kinds of situations, trying to say I wasn't involved with this and pointing fingers all in the inside of the organization. All of that is poison. And for those of us who are constantly, continually saying, let's look to First Nations governments who can make their own decisions, it tells you two things. One is these large-scale organizations just seem to be dysfunctional over and over again. How many times did we have the same conversation about the Assembly of First Nations and the forcible removal of then National Chief Roseanne Archibald? Mm-hmm. And then secondly is it really tells you that there's a human resource problem, also some concerning, perhaps more nefarious things.
Jennifer, the FSIN in its statement says that it's facing unwarranted attacks that are contributing to heightened racial tensions and perpetrating negative stereotypes. Do you think, though, you touched on this, is it time they come out and speak publicly, meet with the media?
Absolutely. Like, you know what they say, and it's pretty much comms 101, control the narrative or it'll control you. And this is an organization that has not been at all even facilitating a narrative. No one has heard from them. We get this statement that comes out swinging yesterday saying, we did nothing wrong. This is a tax. And then a 10-page fact sheet. But like I said, there could have been even a little statement of like, we'll bring more accountability internally. We'll make sure our systems are strong, because they had admitted themselves that there were clerical errors. There were things that went wrong that should have never happened to begin with. They could have at least thrown a bone that they were attempting to fix some of this. But I do agree that I think we've been hearing about this far too often, and I think the responsibility falls back not just on us, but also the leadership that continue to support these types of organizations. We're the ones that have to hold them accountable, so we have to make sure that our leadership also understands that role. But it just appears to be a gigantic mess, and I don't see our way out of this until we start recognizing the role that we're all playing. And I don't think it's an attack to hold any governing bodies accountable in any way, because they're power structures at the end of the day.
Niga, moving to the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation that was on Tuesday, just your thoughts on this year's day.
Well, lots of things. There was a Ledger poll that came out that said that approximately 1/3 of Canadians participate in Orange Shirt Day, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. That translates to somewhere in between 12 and 14 million Canadians who put on an orange shirt, who walked in the streets, who participated in events in their community. I was in Ottawa, happening to see the national event on Parliament Hill, which was produced wonderfully by APTN. Of course, I'm a little biased because here we are in APTN talking about it, but everything ran on time. The speeches were very dignified and incredibly well versed, and covered the span of different Indigenous communities, different sexualities, genders, geographies all throughout the continent, and really was beautifully ended with Susan Gluckhart bringing all of the different singers on stage. It was a really beautiful day, and I think it's an indication that there's momentum growing. We are 10 years since the TRC calls to action have been released. We're 5 years since the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation was declared as a national event, and the momentum is growing. We need to double down now more than ever, and we need to not just do this for a day. We have to do this every day of our lives, working on building healthy relationships in private, public institutions, in every single thing that we do, from child welfare to education to justice to health and everything else in this country.
Jennifer, your thoughts on this 5th National Day for Truth and Reconciliation?
I think, exactly what Nigon said, and I think we are starting to see more of that momentum. And the days aren't feeling as heavy, if that makes sense. Like I'm feeling that, especially as Indigenous people, we're almost finding a way to turn these days into a positive. And I attended a powwow in Saskatchewan, and it felt really good compared to last year, where, some people on the internet were spewing racism because I wore an orange shirt. I did see that there were some posts floating around from some pretty toxic racist individuals over on the internet, but I found, if you just don't listen to them, it's almost like they're speaking into the wind. And that's an opportunity for the rest of us to go to these powwows, go to these events, and really take in the day to remember what the purpose of this day was. And the people that don't understand truth and reconciliation, or they're not ready to have that conversation yet, we just let them say whatever they need to say on the internet, and no one pay attention to them. And then the rest of the day felt good. So and I like that Nigon talked about how the day ran on time, because that is one of my favorite things about us. Is I've gone to several events where a chief gets up and acknowledges everyone in the room, and suddenly you're 2 hours behind schedule. So that's a big win, is if we can stay on schedule. That's also a good sign. So.
Right. Well, it wasn't just on the internet, unfortunately, though, Nigon. At the same time, on the morning of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, a First Nations cabinet minister in Manitoba had her office firebombed. A relatively unknown comedian posted a bit making light of residential schools. A few days before, a well-known denier spoke on university campuses in Winnipeg. What do we make of all of that?
When the fringe are so desperately trying to get relevancy, attention, space, it's evidence that the status quo has changed. It's evidence that change is happening, and it's evidence that what is normal is a new normal. And I think that this is evidence of, there's always crazy's got a crazy. And people who want to argue that nonsense is sense, it's all convenient, because I think almost everybody you described there who perpetrated those things don't have a job, don't have anything else more productive to do, and are so desperate because they have been ostracized and marginalized by society that for the most part knows that there are children buried in potential unmarked graves somewhere in the country, potentially at residential school sites, that there have been children that have been missing, children that were harmed in the schools, residential schools, that there continues to be a massive crisis around children in the child welfare system. And that's just the issue of children. I haven't even talked about women or men or young men or elders. You know, there is a huge set of crises in this country. We have so much work to do, and we can't get distracted by people who want to yell fire in a crowded theater. We have too much things to do.
Yeah, Jennifer, your thoughts? Do we still have a ways to go when it comes to truth and reconciliation?
Oh, absolutely. I think we do. And a lot of these people that are denying the history of residential schools, exactly what Yvonne said, a lot of them I just don't think have anything better to do. I saw one post where this lady that's a commentator on social media basically said like not to give in to the wokeness of like Orange Shirt Day and blah, blah, blah. And she ends it off with saying, this is the only way we survive this. And I'm like, that is the most dramatic thing I've ever heard in my entire life. But you don't have to look very far to find the contradictions and the hypocrisy with a lot of these people. These are the same people that truly believe that teachers are out to get their kids. They believe the government is up to no good. They're being oppressed. They're being suppressed. But then when it comes to us and our history and our children, there is no dang way that this ever took place in their country. But now when it comes to the oppression of them, they're trying to, ban books and the whole thing because God forbid the government is out to get them. But yeah, when it comes to very real documented history of things that legitimately happened, that's where suddenly their blinders go on and there's no way it could possibly happen. So these are people that you can't really reason with or even argue with because it's just contradictions and bad faith all around. So.
Excellent point. Jennifer, Nigad, we'll leave it there. Thanks to you both.
Yeah, Miigwech, thanks so much.
Thanks.